Hi, everybody. It's T Falcon Napier. Welcome to the Oracle itself. Today is our coaching and training session number 36, in fact. And there's a couple of things I'd like to go over on today's call. And then there's a couple of topics that surprisingly we have not covered that are very basic and central to all things tension management. And so I definitely want to make sure we carve out some time in the next couple of sessions to get that squared away. This call is going to be morphing into that change grid of the week sort of thing. And today we're getting our taste of that. So instead of, doing it as a training course, I'm going to do it more like as an application skills kind of a training coaching sort of a thing. Because bottom line, you guys have already learned the sweeping majority of anything and everything we even talk about in certification training. So you got plenty of training under your belt, and we've collected all those videos and the transcriptions and all that. So I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd see if ChatGPT can help me whittle that down into a book. And then, people could have that as a reference tool if they want. But bottom line, I think in the next few weeks, we're going to get to the point where it's time to start saying, instead of just talking about these principles, let's actively apply these principles as the Oracle itself originally intended. And so that's where this is all heading. So today, I want to kind of pick up where we left off last time around, and that is with the discussion about ideal locations on the change grid, and you guys figure out where you are. So what I did, and I thought I'd send it out, but it was actually sitting in my outbox, so it never really got transmitted. But I wanted you guys to kind of fill out this starter sort of change grid so that we can test a couple of things and see how this is all working out for you guys. So I got 4 responses. Thank you all very much. Anyone who hasn't filled it out yet is certainly welcome to do so when they get a chance. Just follow the link in the email that I sent out. But let's go ahead and view the change grid. Now, all you guys know each other, so I didn't run this as a report where I could hide people's names or anything like that. Obviously, if we're going to be doing this with the general public, I would run it as an anonymous report, just as a good practice. Because there's no point in singling out any particular individual. I mean, each individual received their own results, so that they know who they are. But for today, I'm just going to do it on screen. We can do a lot more lively things if we just do it on screen. So yeah. Now, if I am not mistaken, we pretty much got to this one about speaking my personal truth. Did we do setting clear boundaries? Do you guys remember from last time around? Did we talk about that one? Kind
I
of.
don't remember that one.
No.
All right. Well, then I know we talked about communicating the reason for wanting to chat. So let's start with setting clear boundaries in my interactions. And by the way, just so you guys kind of know what we can do on screen is I can filter respondents by demographics, but I didn't ask any demographic questions. When we deploy this for the general public, in the way we've been describing, I do want demographic questions. I think it'd be very interesting to kind of know certain things about the people that are filling it out, because that then allows us, when we run reports, to slice and dice things to kind of see, did people over the age of 55 respond differently than people under the age of whatever. So we can create any sort of demographic questions we want, and we can have multiple questions so we can really slice and dice. As we apply these filters by demographics, the respondent list ends up changing. So that's interesting to do. So we can do that. That's when we're really running a profile. When we generate a report, we can generate a report so it's visible on screen, or so that you can download it. We can even email it to someone. And that's where I'm able to make it an anonymous profile. And I can include expanded reports. So rather than seeing one change grid with all of your activities on it, I can give you a document that has a separate page for each layer for each activity. And obviously that grows to a very large, cumbersome document rather quickly. So you'd be talking about, I don't know, 8-9 pages per activity. So that, and then I can also include the group results. I can include the individual reports. I can include a quick reference guide, and then I can mail it to whoever wants it. I can also generate statistics. And that's kind of an interesting thing to look at, particularly, well, let me just go ahead and do this real quick. I'll show you something fun. Oh, sorry, gotta have all activity. You'd think the man would know how his own software operates. View stats report on the screen. Okay, so here's the stats report. So I'm going to scroll through. Don't look at the screen. You're just going to get seasick. I want to go to a particular section on the rankings. Okay, so this page, this section of the statistical analysis is all on rankings. And so what it does is it looks at each of those 4 dimensions you rated on, so size, ability, challenge, and importance. And then it lists them in the order from highest to lowest. So when it comes to which of these tasks of these 12 feels like it's the biggest task, the one that's going to take the most resources, et cetera, and the one that won was listening actively to understanding the other person's perspective. I don't know why people found that to be a much bigger task, but then right below it, working towards consensus and maintaining calm, those were both 7.5s on size. Thoughts? Yeah. But interesting, they thought that stopping engaging in circular, non-productive conversations, those ones that just, they never go anywhere, they just go around and around and around. And the only way to stop it is to just stop it, don't engage in what's going on. People consider that one to be a very small activity. So it's interesting to kind of look at that. The next one is ability. Which ones do people feel like they have the greatest ability to perform? And so this stop engaging, they rated their ability as a 9.5. So it was the smallest, but it's also tied for being the one that has the greatest amount of ability associated with it. And then evaluating whether interactions with difficult people are worth their time and energy. I hope you guys can see this. I'll zoom in a little bit. Where the one that they found the lowest ability defining and communicating the reason for wanting to chat. They gave their ability a 6.5. That's, smack dab in the middle pretty much. And so we can use this information to better structure training programs so that we put more energy in the things where they're reporting a lower level of ability and maybe a little bit less, although 9.5 is not 12. So there's a lot of room left for these. Again, these are average ratings. So, and when you have a population of 4, it's, I don't know, it's that averages mean all that much. This next little grouping is based on the perceived level of challenge that the population rated, and the challenge of 9.3. So that's pretty high. Again, 12 would be the highest, but 9.3 for working towards a consensus agreement or resolution. That was considered to be the most challenging, the most difficult activity. Where evaluating whether interactions with difficult people are worth the bother, that got a 6.5 on challenge scale. So are you guys finding this interesting as we just quickly look at this for the first time?
It seems rational to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, no,
yeah, go ahead. Was that Brian yeah? All right, anyway, but to me, the one that's most interesting when you were looking at a group profile, and the one that we'd actually start with if we were debriefing the results of a ChangeWorks profile with a client, and I'm talking about a big corporate client that did a big group profile, is the fourth one, and that's importance. So of all of these activities, which one did the respondents consider to be most important? Interestingly enough, 3 of them tied at 9.8. 9.8 is a significantly high level of importance. Now, but it's not a 10, it's not an 11, it's not a 12. So 9.8, 9.8, 9.8. So what are these things? The things they considered most important, or you guys, those of you who filled it out, the things you considered most important were working towards reaching a consensus, agreement, or resolution, maintaining calm, and listening actively. Now, just behind those, there were a couple of 9.5s. And those would be apologizing when realizing I've contributed negatively to a situation. That just encompasses the take responsibility for your involvement in whatever's going on. And then managing my emotions. biases, and emotional triggers. The one that they considered to be least important, only a 7.3, which is fine north of center, but it's still only in the moderate range, is speaking my personal truth. So this is an interesting kind of thing because it gives us feedback as, if you will, we're the author, if you will, of the activity list. And the test that we are always subjecting ourselves to in doing a group profile is, did we come up with activities that people think are really important? Or did we just put them up here because we think they're important, but the population doesn't agree? Now, while this gives a strong, I mean, 7.3 is the lowest, 8.5, a high importance rating began at 8. So everyone rated 8 or higher, or averaged out rating 8 or higher on 11 of the 12 activities. So that tells us it's a good activity list, but I need to see things like 10s. I'm not asking for 11s, I'm not asking for 12s, but I want to know that the people filling it out consider this to be at least a 10 on the importance scale, or it may reflect to me that I don't understand the audience I'm going after, and that means I can't meet them where they are. And so that's why this importance ranking is such a critical thing for professionals using this to really understand.
You can on that. I agree with you there. And from an HR perspective, particularly when you're trying to identify and close gaps in productivity,
Yep.
I think that this particular one, in fact, I always start with this one
Yep.
in the analysis and in the conversation with the client, because trying to understand what they think is important versus what leadership believes is important is critical, and it may begin to lead you to trying to understand and respond to gaps.
Exactly, exactly. And I think it's also just kind of like maybe even a litmus test sort of a result where you're basically, I'll say it this way. If people don't think it's important, does it really matter what their ability and their challenge and their size say?
Right.
Well, I mean, they could have great ability and see little, if any, challenge, but if they don't think it's important, what do you predict? So yeah.
See,
Go ahead.
also, Tom and I had a conversation about this because for me, like if I'm asked to judge something
Yep.
from a scale from 1 to 10,
yep,
nobody's ever going to get a 10 from me because that means they're absolutely perfect.
right.
In my mind, if I don't have that scale, then the scale doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't make sense. So to me, 1 to 12, 12 meant the world would end. And 1 meant it didn't, I could sleep through it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right.
9.8 is pretty damned important.
Well, that's why yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like, we're hoping people will give us a rating right around 10, because they could rate it all the way up to 12. And it's interesting how many times in a corporate setting, it's the executives that have really been involved in the crafting of the activity list. And they go, well, the importance for that one's got to be a 12. That one's got to be a 12. That one's got to be a 12. And they go down, 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 down. And of course, we don't try to steer them as they're coming up with this stuff. We want the results to kind of reveal all by themselves what's going on with the thinking of the management and executive team and all that. So it all gets sorted out during the thing. But yeah, this is darn close to 10, and we did set 10 as being the ideal rating for these particular activities. So yeah, you're right. Well, I don't know that anything that we ever look at on a ChangeGrid is a 12, and I don't think that anything we ever look at is a 0 on any of the 4 scales. And so when people are getting certified in this, one of the things I know we talk about as a best practice is that whenever you see a 0 or a 12 in any of the ratings, you got to stop for a second and ask yourself, was that really the result of a logical, thoughtful, mindful, calculated, assessment?
Or is this person in big trouble?
Right. Or was it just an instant emotional reaction? with, a knee-jerk kind of a thing. And so if it's a 12, obviously we'd go like, whoa, whoa, whoa. If someone says like challenge is a 12 and the size is a 12 and oh my gosh, their ability is a 0, those numbers are telling us something very powerful, but they're not telling us what the change grid we'd be telling on all the other numbers you could choose. They're saying this person is in a really, really difficult or problematic situation, however the problem is manifesting itself. So you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Yeah. Okay, anywho, the other thing I'll say before we move on to back to our little exploration of ideal locations is keep in mind that a population of 4 people is not considered statistically significant. It's just not large enough to be representative of a population that you're going after. And for this particular change grid, the population equals humanity. So that population or the target population is vast. And so these numbers will adjust and we may very well see certain things go up or down or whatever as more and more people fill out the change grid. We may watch these. For example, one of the reasons why I suspect you guys rate your ability as being quite high on so many of these is because of certain factors that may represent you, but don't represent the population as a whole. And what I mean by that is that you guys are in the world of human growth and development. This is something you've already been thinking about. I have to believe this is not your first exposure to dealing with difficult people. So I would expect that a population of professionals or a population of more adult sorts of individuals are going to look different than if I was profiling the general public between the ages of 18 and 25. You know what I mean? So I think we're going to see these numbers change. I just wanted you to see that this is one of the things that we can actually do with the ChangeWorks results on a group profile. Ultimately, by the way, it will also give us, okay, don't worry about what you're looking at here because it's just too much. It's even hurting my eyes. Oh, I don't know where it went. Yeah. But it'll also give us an action plan. What do we need to do at the activity specific level to do whatever it is that we're doing? Okay, anywho, that's what all the rest of those things on the page look like. But whenever we're doing a group of people who know one another, like if you guys were all working on the same team or whatever, we generally feel that if people aren't comfortable letting their names be explored, then we have to wonder why people aren't comfortable letting their names be shown and talk about that first, if they're on a team together or in a family or whatever, what are we trying to, hold near and dear? So I'm going to imagine because you guys are all, on the call, one another and all that, and no one gave any startling answers. So I thought it's okay for me to show it this way. Hopefully that's okay with you guys as well. All right, so we left off, I do believe, with number 5. I think we'll go that one. So I'm just selecting activity number 5. All individuals are selected so we can view the change grid. Now, let me zoom in a little bit on this. You can see a little bit more about what's going on. Just to remind you what you're looking at, this is a composite change grid. If you are using the online system, and by the way, you guys all have access to the system, if for nothing other than your personal change grid, anytime you want to simplify the diagram or zoom in on a particular layer, just go up here to this drop-down menu for the background image and choose whichever one you want to look at. So layer 1 are the 5 levels of tension. So it's just showing you, it's the same plotting, obviously. It's just allowing you to focus in on, one particular layer so you can talk about what's going on. Again, I'll try to keep this zoomed in, but it seems like it wants to reset every time I do something. The other thing I'll draw to your attention is what this legend is over here. S for size, I for importance. Obviously, your physical location on the change grid is reflecting the answers you gave for perceived challenge up here and perceived ability down here. So I know the answers to those 2 dimensions the moment I look at a change grid, but how do I understand what people think the size is or the importance is? Well, that's when we had to be a little more creative. And so size is revealed, indicated by the shape of the object that is holding whatever the information is. So if it is a circle, it's holding you, a person, inside of it. Or if it's a very large profile, instead of being an alpha character there, it would be a number, and that would be the number of people in the whole population that plotted there. So once you have more than 26 people in a population, who said what is not as important as how many said what. And so that's what that's all about. So the color of the circle is telling me what your importance rating is. And if it's red, or sorry, the size. If it's red, you said it was large. If it's that orangish kind of color, it was moderate in size. And if it's green, it was small size. Now, you'll also see that there's a triangle and a diamond. The triangle is the average rating. And so you'll see here, this is the triangle that shows the average rating, and it is enclosed by a orangish gold kind of a color. That tells us that the average rating indicated a moderate size. Okay, and the diamond is the ideal location. And we thought ideally this should be a moderately sized activity. Honestly, we believe all activities should be moderately sized with, unless something out of the ordinary is really happening, then we're content to just stay moderate in the world of size. You can get more done that way. The importance rating is shown by the color of whatever is filling that shape. So in the case of the who you are, that's the pound sign represents either a letter or a number. So that's you. And so whoever B is thought that it was highly important and a pretty big task. Can you see that? Just want to make sure you guys know what you're looking at. So around a red circle with a red character in the middle is big, big. So high importance, large size, and you see where they're plotting other than that. And so if we look at the ideal location, that's the diamond, people did consider it to be very important, or we want people to consider it to be important, and lo and behold, they did. So the triangle again is the average location, the diamond is the ideal location. Okay, you guys with me? Yeah?
Mhm.
Okay, because the test is about to begin, so just consider yourself so you know what you're looking at. I'm going to go back to the composite diagram. Anyone want to tell me why I always want you looking at a composite diagram?
For our own education.
Your own education. Yep, tell me more. Why is it important that you guys are always looking at the composite, even though the individual layers are available to you?
So that we can get the biggest overview and be able to actually start looking at a grid and be able to interpret it.
Exactly. When we can stack all these layers on top of each other, instead of reading the surface of a particular layer, we're reading the full depth of all the layers. So when I'm seeing where individual B is plotting, I go like, well, here's some things I know. I know they're in power stress. I know that they are a driven expressive. I know that they're in this motivator kind of role that's going on. I know they're between the green circle and the red circle. So there's a lot of things I know because I'm comfortable looking at a composite diagram. I know they think that the intensity is quite significant, and but they're not engaged yet. They're actually more intentional around it because they're in tension rings. So are you guys getting more and more comfortable looking at composite diagrams and being able to kind of read through the stack?
With you,
Yes.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
with
Okay.
you around, definitely.
Well, I mean, look, you only get good at reading grids by reading grids. And so, the more you do it, the easier it becomes. So while I want you to get comfortable just looking at the composite change grid, if we end up in a discussion, or let's say that you're using this with a client, or you're sharing your results with someone who isn't as fluent in all things change as you are, you can certainly say, well, like, let's look at the engagement rings for a second. And then, you can show that we got 3 people with nice intentions to do it. One person is out there ready to execute, et cetera, et cetera. All right. So now, this particular activity we've chosen, you just scroll a little bit, setting clear boundaries wish I could get this to stay jumbo. Oh, maybe I can do it this way. La da da da, zoom in, command plus, command plus. Okay, fine. That's probably okay. Setting clear boundaries in my interactions. Now, when we look at the population, we can see where everyone is plotted, but remember, this was an exercise in you guys figuring out ideal locations. Now, I've already put in the ideal location, so we're going to take your test and change it a little bit from last time around. Now the question is, why do you think T said that's the ideal location for this activity? Do you agree with it, not agree with it? If you don't agree with it, where do you think it could be? And then we'll talk about things from there. So I said it should be at coordinates 10, 10. And again, the activity number 5, setting clear boundaries in my interactions. Why would I have said we want that to be an amiable, driven driver? Anybody thoughts?
Because you got to be cautious of the people element, about setting clear boundaries. So the people element is very important, but it is something to get done. I mean, do now. So, a 10-10 would be someone who would be doing it now.
Right, and getting it done. And again, we're trying to say here that, well, I mean, you got to set your own boundaries. The thought that someone is going to set boundaries on your behalf that are perfect for you, what's that all about? That's them, more controlling you or whatever. The question here, what are your boundaries? And so this is why we're saying, like, you need to be a driven driver when it comes to being someone who asserts themselves, asserts their boundaries, all that. But as to David's point, you got to keep that human element involved, because ultimately the boundaries are about other people, I would imagine, more often than not.
Yeah.
Okay, thoughts about that, anybody? Yeah, so now, where is the average among the 4 of you plotting? You guys are plotting as a somewhat expressive, amiable driver. A somewhat expressive, amiable driver. For just a moment, I'd like you to, in your head, become that person, become that personality, become that energy, and tell me or demonstrate for me what you would sound like when setting boundaries. So you're an expressive, amiable driver. How do you sound different than that amiable, driven driver when it comes to setting boundaries?
I want to get,
Well, you
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No,
No,
no.
go ahead. T, you were first. Go ahead.
Oh, shoot. So I might say something like, I just want you to know that I want to be able have you understand where I'm feeling, and I want you to understand how important this is, that we set boundaries.
Yeah.
It all sounds like I'd like to do something. I'm interested in doing something.
I'm hoping you'll let me do
I'm hoping
something.
you'll let me do something, as opposed to we need to do this now.
Yep. Now, I would say to you that the trip you would make from the current average location to the ideal location, we're improving the situation. Any movement out this direction is a movement in the right direction. So there'll be some improvement. But ultimately, if you want to do this task best, you would want to be an amiable, driven driver. Now, some said, well, I could also build a case for why you would want an analytical energy when it comes to setting boundaries. And I can appreciate that. So why do you think that maybe an amiable energy would be a useful thing when it comes to boundaries?
Well, you don't want to turn anybody off. You want to, have people open to you, and that, you want them to feel comfortable talking to you, and like you're not going to judge. You're going to let's be friends.
Yeah, and so that analytical element helps you to better figure out how to package and present the information, so it doesn't come off as being too brutal. I mean, imagine a 12-12 when it comes to boundaries. They've pulled weapons. So, and I mean that literally. If they're that far out, someone's pulling up weapons, or they're definitely in a fighting stance to do whatever's going on. But let's think of what the activity itself. So this again is just a reminder. setting clear boundaries in my interactions. That does feel like an action that I'm taking, but was there an action that I took before I could set clear boundaries? Did I need to do something before I did that so that
Identify the problem.
yeah, I got to identify the problem. I need to understand the situation before I even know what boundaries to set. And so I think if I change the verb to something about identifying boundaries as opposed to setting them, or processing boundaries, or exploring boundaries, something like that, you can hear more of an analytical element that would come up in that. So if the verb was a little bit more, before you start telling people about your boundaries, you might want to know what your boundaries are. Then you could see that that would certainly be more of an analytical activity, still driver, obviously, but
Well, I think that's why being amiable is important. That was my interpretation. You'd need to get people to open up and then say, hey, I think there's a problem here. What do you think? Let's talk about this. And
yep,
you
yep.
know, you can't just go in and say, I have decided that this is the analysis here.
Well, right. Again, even if we're talking about dealing with difficult people, we know that a conversation is going to occur. And certainly there are energies that are more supportive of conversations happening than conversations just being barreled over. Amiable people, and again, we don't do this as personality typing, but you guys get the energy. People who are predominantly an amiable energy or primarily an analytical energy, these people will talk until the cows come home. People that are way up grid, they'll talk, but do you guys get to the thought that can they stay on a topic, or are they bouncing all over? And the people, to Anja's point, the people that are more that driver energy, they figure the time for talking is over. The further out grid they go, the more they're likely to bottom line it. And to Anja's point, that doesn't bode well for the conversation that's about to happen. And so we need to really look again at the activity. So setting boundaries does not mean that I have revealed my boundaries, or I have presented my boundaries, or we have discussed those boundaries. This is just setting them, or it doesn't talk about protecting those boundaries or whatever. So different verbs might require us to be a little more driven about it, maybe a little more analytical, maybe a little more amiable, maybe even a little more expressive. So that verb is all important. It's
Yeah,
great.
it was for me because I don't really want to tell people what my boundaries are. I want to hear what they have to say. I don't want them to couch what they're going to say by what I've told them about me.
Right.
I don't learn anything when I'm talking.
Well, that's a great observation. So you still come into the discussion aware of your own boundaries, and you'll certainly still feel when your boundaries are being violated. In fact, that was another question that was on the original list, and it just didn't make the final cut. But this idea about you holding true to your boundaries, I forget what the actual verb was, but it was about like enforcing whenever someone is moving you out of bounds or whatever. And so that's again, the verb is all important to what's going on. I like the idea that that you know your boundaries and you'll bring them up. You know, so yeah. Yeah. Okay. Other thoughts about this particular plotting? No. Now, obviously, you guys know you see your own results. And by the way, everyone who's joined the call, you just fill this out. You'll get your results. You'll see what's going on. But individual B is someone who's basically reporting level of ability of a 5, the challenge of a 10. We would like to see your ability be a solid 10. And so there is an opportunity here for additional training, growth, coaching, counseling, whatever it is, but something to boost the person's knowledge, skill, and experience so they can do that. Obviously, they see the challenge as being right where it is, but that idea about how do I best equip myself to be able to what was the verb we used? Setting those boundaries, clear boundaries. How do you go about doing that? A couple of people in the population of 4 actually said, well, I mean, I'm still in power about it, if you will, but it's something we figured out. I mean, you remember that if I draw a horizontal line through the change grid, you guys should know what that line is called, by the way. If I draw a horizontal line directly through balanced perceptions all across the
Hard line.
that's the
Outline.
heart line. That's the heart line. So anything that is even slightly above the heart line is something we're still trying to refine, or way up here it'd be a puzzle we're trying to solve, or something new we're trying to explore. Anything south of the heart line represents something that's been figured out. But keep in mind, you're not down in apathy. It's not like it's become etched in the concrete of your mind. But nevertheless, you're going like, no, I've figured out this is something I know how to do, and I'm comfortable with it. But you're still up there in power. By the way, when it comes to the intention ring, that's where you guys are, or the engagement rings. You guys are still in intention. I intend to set those boundaries. I might intend to support, enforce, disclose, whatever. Again, the verb changes, the result might change, but nevertheless, you guys are in tension, where I've got individual C who is out here in execution. So whoever individual C is, and again, I'm not doing individual readings today, but I'm happy to for you guys, because that's the nature of this class. Individual C is kind of saying, oh no, I know my boundaries, and the boundaries are known. And so let's see, I think I know who that is. Yeah, Chris, is Chris on the call? No, but I'd love to hear Chris give us an idea about his relationship with his boundaries. So have they been tested? Does he feel that they need to be particularly well structured? Why this plotting where everyone else is here in solid intention? Yeah, thoughts about that? Anybody? Theories?
Well,
there's a lot
go
of
ahead.
Yeah, go
thank you.
ahead.
There's a lot of papers on boundaries, and I think it's only because I don't really do a whole lot of, I do reflection, but not at the present moment. And I find boundaries difficult.
Difficult to set, to,
Yes. Yes.
okay.
And to really understand what my own boundaries are. I can better understand it when somebody else says something. So Angie and I would not have a great discussion, because
Oh,
I'm waiting to understand her so I can better understand mine.
oh, all right. And so, and Anja, you would be more positioned to understand someone else's rather than disclose your own. Was that how you framed it?
Yeah, it's not that I wouldn't disclose them.
Mhm.
I would try not to inhibit
Ah, very
the
good.
else. That's the thing that I don't want to do. I know that I can, it sometimes if I can be kind of forceful, and people, I don't want that to turn anyone off. I want them to tell me honestly how they feel. I don't
Mhm,
want them to couch it. I don't want them to make it flowery and pretty and try to be what I want to hear. I want to hear the truth about what they hear, what they think.
Right, very good. All
However,
right.
I don't know if that's really, how do you determine what the truth is?
Oh,
I
that
try
was
to
an Anja question from the last time around. That's great. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, you sometimes get a feeling for when somebody's trying to gild the lily, trying to make you feel good about yourself and oh, good for you. And you can also get a feeling for when people are not comfortable with you and they're not going to tell you much. But when you can tell when they're really saying something close to their heart, they've got good ideas on how they feel. And if you can get people to that place, then you can really have a good conversation. But as long as they're looking at you going, what do you want to hear? What can I tell you that makes you like me? That you're not going to get anywhere with them. You're not going to, it's going to be superficial. And I don't like superficial. I mean, it's fine for parties, but I want to, if I'm talking to you about something that's really near and dear to me, I want to know why we seem to have differences. And I want to know what you're really, really thinking about it. What's your experience? Because experience really changes everything.
Yeah, yep. Mhm.
So I guess that doesn't judge.
Okay, go. Did T finish your thought, and then Tim, what were you about to say?
Well, I didn't have another thought.
Oh, okay. Well, you're welcome to have as many as you want and share. All right, Tim, what were you going to say?
The whole conversation has me thinking about the mediation process.
Mhm.
And I think that this is extremely useful for certifying folks to become either a mediator or an arbitrator, because it entails a lot of what we're talking about. And it gets down to what are people willing to gain and lose, which is something we talk about, right?
That's right.
And the idea of trying to explore people's interest and their desires in that process. And so it's a matter of asking those kinds of questions and asking them at a particular time of the conversation to try and get folks to open up and talk about their interest. And so this is quite interesting. It's very much a part of that process of mediation and arbitration.
Okay, excellent. Brian, you also unmuted. Did you want to throw something in?
Yeah, I was traveling, so I couldn't talk, but I was going to add, like, this, the boundaries is, to Tim's point, an interesting one, because it's physiological at the start, like how someone feels about something. Like I didn't get to take the assessment, but I probably would score like where the C is. Yeah, definitely. Because what I find is a challenge is I don't have a challenge with my own boundaries, but I'm really trying to understand others. And so, like, again, people here say, because I'm passionate about this idea of, no one, that sickness should be optional, we can do better. So when they say things like I'm intense, they already understand what my boundaries are. I kind of wear that wherever I go. But I try to understand theirs, and that becomes difficult because, like what Anja was describing, I don't think they're a lot of times being genuine. Like they're doing things based on compliance, based on not going against the grain and all those different kinds. And sometimes that's going to meet you where you are, but you're not being authentic to yourself, and so you're going to feel out of place. And that's what I see a lot here. So I try to bring them forward a little bit and challenge them. But then I get feedback that, yeah, this guy, he's intense with.
And so let me make a comment about that, because there's another thing happening here with boundaries. We may not be sitting down and just deliberately saying, these are my boundaries, but in everything someone says to you, they are letting you know whether or not you are behaving in a way that is within their boundaries or beyond their boundaries.
Exactly.
And so if they're labeling you as being intense, they're saying his behavior is out of bounds for.
And see, that's, and I wish I could say that I apologize for that, but I don't.
Oh, no, you don't need to. No, you
don't need I really don't.
Well, I think we're all in agreement that anything that's wrong in the world has nothing to do with us. And so we're all victims of everyone else's nonsense. We have no role in it. So, all right. But the other thing I wanted to say about boundaries is I did tell you guys that for all these topics we're talking about for life situations, these exist because I did a program on this, and these activities are from that program. And so this idea about boundaries, I just wanted to share with you one little part of the training about boundaries. We say that humans should have as few boundaries as necessary. But whatever boundaries they do have they need to hold them as sacred. And so, and I present that because I say you have to keep in mind that a boundary not only protects you, but it may also prevent you from going out and seeing another thing from another way or whatever. So there's no point in having boundaries that are actually going to more restrict you than restrict other people's behaviors towards you. So have as few boundaries as possible, but whatever boundaries you do set, you need to hold them sacred. I'll give you an example of this from the work we do with clients. When we're doing pride-based leadership, we do talk about coming up with brand standards, if you will, about the way that employees will interact with one another, or the way management executives interact with employees, or whatever the dynamic happens to be. And we say, now you need to divide all those behaviors into 5 categories. There are behaviors that are mandatory. There are behaviors that are encouraged. There are behaviors that we're neutral about. There are behaviors that are discouraged, and there are behaviors that are forbidden. Well, these behaviors that are forbidden end up being those behaviors that are out of bounds. These are not, or it's something happening outside of the boundaries that the company considers to be appropriate. So for example, they might say that in a corporate setting, if you start calling somebody names, that's out of bounds. And this company can say, we don't want people to be saying things, name calling and all that sort of stuff. It's simply an out of bound behavior, in which case it would be grounds for dismissal to do that. And, taking it away from words, you all know there's not a company out there that allows people to get into fistfights and considers that to be an acceptable or an encouraged, or mandatory behavior. That's just that there are boundaries. So we don't want to have no boundaries, but we also want to make sure that the boundaries that we do have are boundaries that we have for a solid reason. Thoughts about making distinctions about, don't have a boundary just for the heck of having a boundary.
Well, that's what HR policies do, right? They explain and outline the governance of behavior in that organization, to your point.
That's the ideal. And they're just saying, like, these are our boundaries. Beyond that, everything's negotiable, everything's discussable. Even if it's a behavior I'm discouraging, I'm still open to talking about it. But if it's on the forbidden list, then it's on the forbidden list. And that's where you got to draw the line somewhere. So that's what ultimately we want the discussion about boundaries to be there. And again, going back to the beginning of my little statement there, I believe that boundaries are limitations you're placing on yourself. So you got to ask yourself, why am I limiting that? Remember that if we go back to the basics of tension management, and I have something to say about that separately, but nevertheless, if we go back to the basics of tension management, one of the things that we say is that that choosing is an extremely powerful and dangerous activity, because the moment you limit your choices are going to limit you. So whatever degree you can practice life, let life be a smorgasbord. Why have the blue plate special when you can have smorgasbord, So keep it open to being that buffet where your choice is, if I don't need to make a choice, don't make a choice. Keep your choices wide open. But if you do need to make a choice, just know that choice is going to limit. And got to be careful around that. Thoughts on that? Yeah.
That's powerful.
Go ahead. That was Tim. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I was just going to say, sometimes when we're dealing with difficult people and trying to resolve conflict, the environment dictates what that norm or what that behavior may be. Well, as role definition, I'll give you an example quickly. I did in the same week training in a large manufacturing firm. Both of these firms, I'm referencing each of you on the call, know them if I were to name them. So I'm doing conflict resolution in a large manufacturing facility. And I ask them, how do they resolve it? One guy looks at another guy, he smirks, they laugh, and says, you tell him. The other guy says, no, you tell him. And he says, well, if the two of us got into conflict, we'd just go out back of the plant and we'd resolve it and come back inside.
Interesting.
But then I fly to the other major firm, which is in the software business, and I ask the same type question. And the answer is, well, we'll sit down and we'll discuss it and we'll explore and try and understand why we have differences.
Yeah. Yep. So the origin of a lot of these boundaries can, come from many different influence points, culture being one of them, history being one, like a long habit of tolerating certain behaviors seem to make those behaviors more tolerable. So for example, if you can imagine, you guys, I'm not going to name them, but you guys know the largest tech company that I worked with. If that organization, it is still okay for executives in front of a general audience of employees or a huge audience of employees to be dropping F-bombs indiscriminately. So, and most people these days are kind of going like, well, that's never been professional. So what's that all about? But it's also offensive, it's unnecessary, it's all those kinds of stuff. And so interestingly enough, that behavior of dropping an F-bomb may be a daily activity in some places, and other places totally out of bounds. Totally out of bounds. Yeah.
But even if it's commonplace, it's still putting people off.
Exactly. But because that organization to this day is still, a poster child for the old, what would they call the old men? The good old guys, whatever it was.
Good old boys.
Good old boys, that's the good old boys time, and that still exists today. So
I watched a video of, the big three automakers are on strike. And I watched a video of an interview with two plumbers who work for an independent large plumbing company who were contracted to work in one of the General Motors facilities in Detroit area. And they said that if they exhibited at their plumbing company one of 50 things that the line workers did every day, they'd be fired.
Yep.
They said that we are required to be on time every day. And that they said there were people who were late 3 days a week. There were people who quit after lunch, people who went out to lunch and never came back, people who would stop their job and sit and talk for half an hour.
Yeah.
And they said
Yeah, and the thing, Tom, that opens up a big can of worms on the world of HR and on the whole negotiations kinds of things, because an undesirable behavior that has been tolerated for a long period of time, you can't suddenly come in and say we're making that a bad thing. They're going to go like, no, this has been part of the history. Yeah, this is traditional or whatever. Yeah, it's driver versus expressive energy. And if you get driver expressives, these are the people who decide that, they can say and do pretty much whatever they say and do. And certainly the people that are way in the danger zone.
It's interesting. Younger people have an easier, it seems like to me, an easier time to talk about their boundaries. And I think a lot of their supervisors, if it's not in a policy, they have a difficulty talking about it.
Yeah.
When it comes to work, and like the individual said earlier, as I talk to a lot of supervisors, people do leave the office. They just go about their own thing and can't figure out why you are upset with it.
Yeah.
So, be interesting.
It's very interesting. Okay, a couple things I just want to talk about before we're finished for the day. This hour has flown by. The first is that I wanted to do this to see if I could determine how long it takes to actually go through the results on a specific activity. We have talked about this one activity now for 35 minutes. And so because I wanted to have a new change grid every single week. But obviously, if I do a change grid a week and I can only cover 1 or 2 activities, that's going to leave 10 or 12 activities, or rather 8 or 10 activities unaddressed. So that feels kind of weird to me, but I also don't want to stretch it out and do 12 sessions on one change grid on how to deal with difficult people. So I'd be open to your guys' suggestions about, is there a happy medium where I can really, what I hope I can say is that, look, after attending enough of our weekly debriefs on things, you're going to pick up insights. You're going to be able to look at your own results and know what they mean. And you're just going to kind of learn that in part by osmosis. So the activities we don't talk about, you can kind of process on your own, or they could always engage one of the ChangeWorks coaches to do a proper reading for them if they really do see they've got some challenges on a particular topic. So that's one thing I wanted to do. Yeah. The other thing is that there is a section of the program that I don't think we ever went through, and I think it's vital. So unless you guys can tell me you remember something other than me, do you remember us ever talking about the nature of change? Okay, all training programs, yeah, all training programs that we have ever done, I don't care how short they are, it all starts off with this section called the nature of change. And in the nature of change, this is where we lay down the foundation for our core beliefs about human behavior, about it not being resistant to change. It's all about control, levels of tension come into play, et cetera, et cetera. So I would like to make sure that before we launch into these readings of the week, that I include this section so you guys can have your training that I know has been just organically presented. I just think it's interesting that at week 36, we're talking about doing the first hour of training we always do. So, funny. So I do think maybe the
Did we feel ashamed?
Yeah. Well, you got to know this.
You.
Or is it me?
Yeah. No, it's me. It's definitely me. Anyway, so I'm curious to get your guys' input about how do we, and again, I know I'm babbling, but that's how I process information sometimes. Most of you on this call are formally trained in things related to ChangeWorks, and those that didn't go through formal training have gone through 36 weeks of this. And so I promise you, you've got the lion's share of the content already there. When I start reading these change grids of the week and we start to promote it on YouTube, we have to keep in mind that the people who are filling this out may have absolutely zero experience or understanding of anything having to do with tension management and that. And so I may have to start off saying something like the only thing they need to know about are these 5 levels of tension. And oh, look, 3 of you are in the right level, 1 of you is up in power stress, and that's all I talk about. I just talk about what this layer means. You guys consider that to be a warm-up.
Can you tell us can you read that, what we're addressing, this statement again?
Oh, this particular one was about setting clear
boundaries in my interactions. Okay.
Setting clear boundaries in my interactions.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll throw another one up just for the fun of it. I know we're at the top of the hour, but if I said maintaining calm in challenging situations, let's see what the change grid looks like for that one. Well, you guys are all in power. Well, if the only thing I'm going to talk about is this level of tension, I might say to you, you're all okay on this one, so let's look at the next one. But how many would feel like, oh no, there's more to this than saying we're all okay? Right? Because you guys are out there being rather driven. Yeah, right. I'm okay with being okay.
I'm okay. Yeah.
So, but now just look at it from my perspective, is that I need things to be interesting enough to keep these new people engaged, but not boring for all of you who have already been on a bunch of these things. So I have to figure out how to strike a happy balance so I'm not overwhelming new people, but I'm also not boring you guys. Yeah. So, do I need to suddenly talk about engagement rings? That this activity, and again, this activity was number 10, maintaining calm. There's only one place on the change grid where you're calm, and that's in the middle of the change grid. Down grid, we might use that word, but you're not calm, you're just down grid. So we're here, there's a peacefulness about what's going on. Well, that's a very different discussion about why do I not want you to be so engaged about something like maintaining calm, because is maintaining calm supposed to feel like a fight or a battle? Is it, is it supposed to be, it's
What you're
supposed,
talking.
it's supposed to be a gentle starting point. So
Mhm.
there's a lot more to discuss. So that's my current challenge.
Hey,
How do I
hey,
go?
Brian, I'm sorry.
Yes.
No, go right
Brian,
ahead.
I talk about maintaining calm. I trained, I don't know if Anja met this guy. I trained with a former professional boxer. He actually won the International Federation of Boxing Super Middleweight Championship. And training with him, working pads or light sparring, he would stop. He'd walk up to me, 6 foot tall, 220 pounds, stare me in the face, and yell at the top of his voice, "Calm the F down." It worked every time.
Yeah, I don't know how effective that
It
package.
was. I was like,
Is
yes,
the
sir.
F word necessary?
Well,
Well,
no.
Well, that's the first thing to look at, because that could be outside someone's boundaries.
That's how they do it in boxing.
Yeah, that's how they do
Yeah.
it. Boxing,
And see, my Sifu in martial arts, he would do the exact opposite. So, like, he whispers in my ear, "Too many minds."
Too many
That's
minds.
his way of
Yeah.
entertaining. Too many minds, and
Yeah.
that's the you're not focused enough because your attention is just a leak. He always talks about.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about what the Oracle of the Self is really all about. Where's that single voice that is genuinely you? That's where we want to find calm. Where's this chaos coming from? It's all these other voices. It's all these
Yeah,
other
that's why I think even these like this that you're showing now, the subtleties and where people place, I think, is a good conversation because it does talk about where the attention leak or energy leak is in terms of why they place and or why they're in a certain area on the change grid. So that those little subtleties in terms of movement to me is an interesting conversation.
Yeah, yep. Well, the other thing, the other option that I have is to position my readings for the brightest and the best, and then give people a way to learn what they need to learn in order to understand the kinds of things that all of us are discussing.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, but I still have the practical thing. How many activities can I actually debrief in an hour? Even if I made this call an hour and a half, we tend to go about an hour and 15 minutes is our average with our pleasantries up front. And, we always go over a few minutes. So I could certainly see this being a 90-minute debrief, but even still, would that only be 3 activities out of 10 or 12? So,
Can you do less activities?
well, I could, but keep in mind, and maybe I'll edit this out of the call, that ultimately we are doing this for the general public as a way of stimulating billable opportunities for the ChangeWorks coaches. So my thought is that if I can give someone a list of 10 or 12, and we can talk about 3 or 4 of them, the ones that are really most significant, talk about those and say, if you'd like to learn more about the activities we didn't cover, well, you can learn to read grids for yourself. Or you can talk to a ChangeWorks professional. So it opens up that opportunity where if I just have 2 or 3 activities and I talk about 2 or 3 activities, it feels like the task is done. And I want people who have a problem dealing with difficult people to be left at the end of this little weekly reading going like, I really do need to pay more attention to this. I need to learn more about whatever's going on. I want to talk to somebody about whatever it is so that there is that. Sooner or later, this has to be monetized, or I don't know what I'm really doing. I mean, having fun, but I can I can talk to you guys whenever we want. So, but I always feel responsible for helping you guys monetize what you've learned. So yeah, that's how we do it. Okay, anyway, that's it for today. Thoughts, comments, questions?
Oh, very good.
Sounds good.
Good,
Yep,
good, good.
very
All right.
good.
Then I'm going to leave with just one little alert. Have you guys noticed in the media that this coming Wednesday at, I think it's 2:20 Eastern time, they're testing the national alert system if they ever needed to, there was an emergency or something. So that's happening. That would be at 11:20 our time. When they did it the last time around, it it shocked me so much. It was so loud. It was so whatever. And it's going to be on all cell phones, all computers, all forms of media, all pretty much at the same time. So I thought, I'm going to warn people so they don't have a heart attack when this happens. That's yeah. You remember we were raised in Detroit, and I seem to remember it was the first Saturday of every month at like 1 o'clock, the air raid sirens would go off.
Yep.
And if you weren't used to the fact that it was just being a test of the system, you'd go like, oh my God, what's happening? So anyway, the big one is happening this coming Wednesday.
It's 12:20 MST, so that would be 9:20 Eastern.
Real, see, wait, 12, no, it goes the other way around. So if it's 2:20 Eastern, you know, it's on the FEMA website.
I was given 12:20 Mountain Time.
12:20 Mountain.
So that would be 3:20 Eastern.
FEMA test.
We're on Pacific time currently.
Yeah, that's true. We're on Pacific right now.
Mm-hmm.
So wait, let me just see what's going on here real quick. Now I'm curious. Y'all made me curious. Just one moment. New window. Alert system test. Yeah, FEMA to conduct nationwide emergency alert test. And it is scheduled for massive emergency alert test. Let me just kind of scroll this in here. It's happening on Wednesday. So massive emergency alert test. Here's what you need to know. It'll be at 2:20 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Every TV, radio, and cell phone in the US should blare out the distinctive, jarring electronic warning tone of an emergency test. This is a test, only a test. And they say, no, we can't even play you the tone. We could get hit with a big fine if we did. So anyway, there you go, 2:20 Eastern Daylight Time through all modes. So anyway, don't be shocked.
Even if your phone is off.
Yeah, I'm turning mine off because I don't need to be, I don't need it. I'll hear everything else. All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Good day, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye,
Cheers.
everyone.
Bye.